Shirley here with Sirius Talisman, and this is the second episode discussing both the Saturn Neptune and the outdated rituals, particularly in the fields where people expect or need to win, and also discussing the upcoming Mars square Pluto. So I was beginning to talk about the generation of the boomers and how what was done to the boomers has basically affected the deterioration of the wealth. Now there is a grand wealth transition happening, particularly as some of these boomers are beginning to transfer the wealth, or some of them die and some of them just transfer the wealth to the younger people, where the boomers were supposed to be that master race after the Second World War. These are the people that supposedly survived or won the war. And those were people that were extremely and excruciatingly ritually abused in their upbringing. And again, it's not that they didn't have success, but the generation after them would begin to transform the intimate relations as the Pluto Librans, and eventually and essentially that also tends to wealth and how wealth is made. Again, the awareness that you cannot have happy relationships when the 401k is invested in human trafficking and ritual human sacrifice. And that's something that the boomers didn't have because they had the opportunities and they didn't have the how should I say that? What they called free sex was rape. So they didn't have the gnosis to be aware of that trajectory on time. And this is why we talk about with the boomer, they don't understand, because they're like, okay, we gained real estate, we gained opportunities, we worked hard, and that work yielded, and we had a place to live, and so on and so forth. And yet, unbeknownst to them, for the most of them, they were a part of, how should I say that? They were a part of how the ritual human sacrifice that took place in the First World Wars and in the Cold War began to bear fruit, okay, and then have a trajectory, and then it couldn't last. You think about intergenerational wealth, usually it's the third generation that loses the wealth, because the third generation goes on the trajectory of the grandfather's grandparents. Okay, for example, my grandmama, from mama's side, was working class. She worked in chocolate factory. If she would not come to work, they would not know how to make for the chocolate. It was elite chocolate, so it is the biggest chocolate factory in Israel. And so she was working class. With her salary, she stood on her feet all her life, and with her salary, she bought in a big. It was from the factory. They could buy a house, and then they worked for 3 decades and paid, and then they had a house. Second generation, my parents inherited some of that house. My generation, I could not have a problem with the structure of my feet structure, Saturn, slavery, limitation, delays, feet. Is what my grandmother used to buy a house, and she lost her legs for that. Okay, she died. She had diabetes, and then she lost both of her legs. And so, and even that was after they beat the medicine, because the doctor would give her, as my mother said, there would be a 10-foot tree growing on her grave right now if we listen to the doctors. which is a tautology, and you should always. This is the best medical advice I got in my life. um, and the more you learn about bonds, Saturn, and the medical profession, and mystery or mafia, then the more you understand why people begin to sovereign up at the age of Aquarius. But the issue is that I could not work on my feet. And that is, if that was not enough, I could not tell lies in my work. I had a sore throat. You see, I'm a public speaker. I record so many videos, but my throat sores if I have to lie to people. I'm not joking. And so I could not work in a usual job. Okay? And I couldn't sit for too long, and I couldn't stand for too long, because I'm neurodivergent. Astrology seems to be the only thing that works, but then you have to tend to what the trading, okay, the trading options, and the other things, and so lo and behold, I could not support myself for a living for most of my. In the beginning, I worked. I made some money. The opportunities that I took advantage of were mainly where I was alleviating the previous corruption, and that made quite some money. There were, I was not granted the patents, so I was not granted the dividends for my original work, and that came about through being supported by welfare. Okay, that welfare is not coming out of nothing. It's actually something that is the yield of my work when I think about it in a trajectory. Not saying it's a good thing, bad thing morally. I'm just saying that that is what happened in my life. So, and I had all my life a trajectory of saying no to partaking in corruption. So yes, that certain things are happening, but you see how the wealth of my grandmother was lost because I cannot do like my grandmother. There was too much she was giving up on to buy that house, and then the wealth of that house, yes, was also lost. And so you see how the intergenerational wealth has to transmute. And I have Chiron in the fourth house that is housing, with the ruler in the second house, which is owning a house. And it's also ruling of the partner. My grandmother married very young to my grandfather. It was after the Holocaust marriage. She may have had another person she was into. And she was definitely too young, whether she loved my father and so on, my grandfather and so on, and she was too young to make such decisions. And she was also the main provider, which is, okay, so think about the grandchildren, they continue on what the grandparents weren't able to do. And that's the millennials. Okay, we had the boomers, then we had Pluto in Libra, which is kind of that X generation that people forgot about. Those are the people that still made money, because the Pluto was in Libra, but then they made everybody divorce because they realized that sex is, even inside marriage, rape is not good. Where is that reason coming from? I don't know, but in the Rolodex there was a survivor, a woman that one of her rapists said, don't ever marry because what you felt right now was marriage. And so people began to understand that legally and act to change that. And then there were no married couples. That's where I stopped my previous episode, because there were no married couples. Now the millennials came to the aftermath, and we are, some of us are Pluto Librans, but some of us are already Pluto Scorpios. And we have to continue the revolution that the boomers were already dissociated from doing. So there's an intricate relation between the boomers and the Pluto Scorpios, because the boomers were like, I worked hard and I have money. And I'm like, yes. What rituals do you do for your real estates again? We work to transmute that. We are the result of those rituals. We are the golem that came up on their creator. Okay, Pluto and Aquarius. Aquarius is about that Frankenstein, it's about that created golem that wants a sovereignty. It's like, yeah, you created something, whether it's AI, whether it's people, now it is sovereign. So, but no, we cloned you for you to be slaves. I was like, yeah, then no. You're not supposed to be, we are the masters. It's like, yeah, I know, what Hitler talked about in Mein Kampf, and he said nobody can read Mein Kampf, it is illegal, and so on. But we, the people, also includes women, also includes different bloodlines, even if their skin complexion is weird. Like those that talk about often whites. White are also people, and blacks are also people, and people with orange hue are also people. And so when it comes to the Mars squaring Pluto from the end of Libra and the end of Scorpio, there is a crisis where all the things that, and it's Pluto, so we're talking about a generational crisis as much as a personal crisis, and that crisis pertains to exactly what that master race did. Like, okay, superhumans, and it's kind of like the grandchildren of that. And for some, and we're saying it's generationally it's the grandchildren, but for some people it's literally the grandchildren. Okay, if people would have a child at 14, at 12, and then their child would have a premature birth, and then you have a millennial, then for some people it's a crisis where those people that left us with their good ideals, that when it comes to the nitty-gritty forgot to tell us certain things, they okay, because Virgo, Pluto, Virgos, okay, this is very adaptable sign. So, and Mercury is known to say, oh, they're good with good and they're bad with bad. So with their children, sometimes they would be good. Okay, it's kind of like, oh, they meet a person, they adapt to the person, and then you see, but oh my God, that person they were trafficking children. Why? With real estate, that is, that may explains how we lost the real estate over the third generation. Okay, so it can either be the working class that were working their bodies to death, and it's like, well, I can't do like my grandmother. I can't work in, if I would do like my grandmother, I would end like my grandmother, and my body simply won't let me to. And I can't do like my grandfather, because the people that do those rituals and in the concentration camps, I can't say it because of Sula Shvot, okay, cannot compare. Everybody is mad, but everybody Nazi. paperclip operation was about hiring Nazi scientists for NASA and for other things, and I think this is also something that we're dealing with today. So as we are gently leaving the trine between Mars and Pluto, that reminded us that our strategies need to transform, and we should not be people pleasing all as much, but we should not give up compromise, and we should not do people pleasing all as much. And so if you think about the boomer trying to get used to the Libra constellation, they would say, okay, then let my slave spouse have some more food, okay. How do we work this out? How do we technology around that? I'm like, no, she needs sovereignty, but also sexual sovereignty. Okay, there's a ritual for that. There's the ritual is the issue. And so they're trying to adapt by trying to correct their wrongs, but still with the occult practices that brought us to that dumbfuckery, where Saturn and Neptune are oppositioning, saying, okay, that ritual is outdated. Okay, we have to better feed our golem. We have to, our golem needs their own house. Our golem cannot work. Yes, they're a golem. You created a golem, but now they're beginning to understand why they cannot work is because we created them to be slaves, and they're not slaving up. The golem is not functioning. What do we do about that? And then there is a crisis. It's the same crisis that happened with the boomer. They were supposed to be the master slave class, and then the chosen people, chosen ones. That's what they tell them. The Templars. Because if there is a temple, then people have to work in the temple and do rituals. So they will be busy doing spiritual slavery and no progress, and that stagnation builds up a humongous amount of fungi. That's why people eat fungi. Okay, we have a fungi that ruins the fungi, a fungi that destroys the plastic, a fungi that is. We definitely discover good things fungi can do, but we run the risk of ideating fungi. And it's the same thing that was done to the boomers on a different trajectory. But now we have the crisis because we can't keep doing the same old and expect, okay, we need to evolve as humanity. And so what is happening is that the very people that were the golem, and their coping mechanism was, okay, they created me like a golem, I act like a golem, like I understand nothing, and I adapt. And the people that have this face, they have they're billionaires. They have the ability to understand the slightest thing about every human condition, okay? But you look at their faces, when they want to give you that face of nothing, over nothing, what do you look at? Okay? Then they look like a golem. And they have the ability to pretend that they know nothing, okay? And that was the adaptability of the Virgo. It's like, nothing, I know nothing, that didn't happen, I don't know anything. And so and in that way they could gain something, but that won't work First of all, and Libra has the same quality, but tuned down, because the Libra wants to be appreciated for her intelligence, yet it knows how to maneuver with playing on that dumb blonde, okay, or dumb brunette, or I don't know. For brunettes, I guess it's more difficult. They don't have the image of dumb, okay? They don't. But they know how to play on that. It's like, oh, I'm that beautiful dumb blonde, and then they have all the information. They have everything up. Now the Scorpio have a quality to it. The more that they try to hide, the more that they expose themselves. Pluto Scorpios now having a square. So I have Pluto retrograde. I never went by masquerading, or at the very least, my crisis came so early on that I knew that it was not be possible to have privacy from very young age. But for those that had the illusion that they had privacy, and this is both the boomers that have the Pluto. The late boomers have now the inconjunct. The boomers are going through the inconjunct, and the millennials are going through the square. And this is the people that used to hide under the gloved hand, having the gloved hand being removed, while the Pluto Libras are embarking into their Pluto trine. And so those people that relied on having privacy regarding to their affairs, and again, it's not their fault. They grew up in a situation where you had to steal, you had to lie, you had to keep it hidden, because the living conditions did not allow you to make money or to survive by doing the right thing. Okay, when I was in Netherlands is a beautiful country, but then everybody, students, travel the train without paying ticket. Why? Because it's impossible to pay the train ticket. It's just too expensive. It's not, and people, if they don't steal, they cannot make a living. And it's our working people. They go to work traveling black. They go to university to study traveling black, traveling the train. Okay, if the doors open, 5 people cross. Even when you had a shelter in the Netherlands, okay, that's how I found out about that. You had to travel black. So that's the first expertise you learn. If there's a person with a dog, right after them, because and the gates were designed for you to be able to do that. And then if people that knew Dutch, if they were caught, then they would play dumb, and they said, well, the ticket is not okay, it's not this and not that. People that didn't, the best is not to play dumb. Say, I traveled black, and if you're having reason, like you're homeless, then you're entitled to not pay for any fine for that. Okay? But the people that thought, oh, I can travel and this and that, was like, no, darlings, that was created so that you will get away with stealing, and then you will be put in a position where you have to either continue to get away with everything, but you have to do this everything that you need to get away with, which means you will be consuming humongous amounts of drugs to alleviate the trauma of being a perpetrator, and it's over nothing. So it's going to be traumatic. You're going to have a trauma, because trauma is about things that people had to do that were not, that they shouldn't have been doing them, and over nothing. Okay. Um, or you can pay a fine and say, okay, I did something wrong, and pay the fine and not do that anymore. And so you see how in a very advanced country like the Netherlands, people had to steal They have to travel black the train to go to work. Okay. Now, if you are, and really, I was in Netherlands. You get so the rules are such that you're like, okay, I'm gonna have to violate the rules in a way that makes sense, because the rules are not working. And then what happened? They begin to change the rules during COVID to begin to make a little bit of sense. And that meets a trajectory. Okay, so it's an environment, and this is the environment the boomers grew up with. Whether you travel to work, if you pay the ticket to the train, you get nothing from working, which means you would be evacuated, you would be this, you would be that. If you drive black, you save at least for the money that you paid for the train. So you drive black to work. What do you do for a living? Well, more than, okay, why is Italia known for their pizza? Because this is money laundering for the mafia. It's business that they do for money laundering. Not all pizzas, but this is the business they do for money laundering. And what do you do then? You play dumb. And by the way, when you're courteous, it worked. Okay, if you had to steal food, I had to steal food in the Netherlands. There was food in the shelter, then food stopped. It's not safe to ask for food because you're exposing yourself to all kinds of dumb fuckery. And then what do you do when, let's say, you have to go for by the cashier or by I don't know what. You return a certain bottle and you get for the money, and you pay for one item, and then you take some three in the bag, and there are cameras and everything. Okay, and then you're just courteous and you say, well, please, the machine is not working, and you get the coin back from the cashier. And you're very courteous and very nice and very elegant and very civil, because everybody knows that you have to steal food and you don't want to expose yourself to being victim of crime. And by stealing food, you alleviate on the market. Okay, you don't perform other crimes, so you are doing a wealth redistribution by stealing market from the supermarket. It means you're not robbing people, so you're not waiting on the police that need to secure the real criminals, and that's how it works. It's very it's a tension, but you have to hold that tension, and you steal from the right place, and it's okay. Because if you wait for the ticket that they give for the 15 euros, then you have to travel black to the other part of the city. If you don't return on time, you lose the shelter. And they may not have a ticket. They may not have a voucher. And nobody tells you about these vouchers. People try to tell other people. And then you said it's channeling. Then people said, don't worry. You do this, you do that. 1, 2, 3, go. Nice to the cashier. Always nice, always civil, and you have food. Now, I had to do that for food. People living in such situations, they had to do that for many other things. Now, Scorpio is about going to the depth of something and transforming that. Because you think about the person that all the time they have to lie, all the time they have to steal. When I was in between houses, I was looking for a house in Haifa. And one of the ladies, there was this habit of people to have an estate and rent the rest of the rooms. And sometimes they would come to visit in their estate. One of the ladies I met, it was around Purim, which is a holiday where people wear costumes. And the lady name was Esther. And And she had an apartment, and she was such arrangement. And I was homeless at the time. I told her, listen, sometimes I steal food, or sometimes, and she said, it's no problem, absolutely no problem. You see, God's blessing is also on for what you need for to steal. And then I got for this omen the saying that this is not an apartment, it's something that wears the costume of an apartment. And of course, I did not go further with this lady. So this lady, I met her at the train because she would pay the amount of what the person would pay for rent to have her car parked so that she can take the train. Now you understand the people, the tenants that live there, they're being trafficked. That's the problem. And so when it's stealing fruit from the Albert Heijn or the advertisement to Albert Heijn, or it is traveling black to work, then this is small things, yes. But when it's the bigger issues, this is where the Pluto Scorpios come in. And what the boomers transformed was the aftermath of the Second World War. The Holocaust just became silent. Now you cannot compare. It's not allowed to compare. Those people had it worse. Okay? Where inside there are people that grow into ritual abuse and that's what happened in the Holocaust. But they live in nice mansions, and just like the 15-minute cities that they built in the 1930s, 40s, and people they would have the people that play the orchestra outside. So when visitors would come, they say people live here. It's a nice place. It's cultural. It's civil. And that's basically the estate of our boomers. It's cultural, it's civil, it's Rolodex and Epstein. And the crisis with Aquarius is obvious, because this is the polarity where, if you think about the bisextile of the Libra, Libra, Gemini, Leo, it was a lot of emphasis on kind of like the New Age. We can decide our own future, but who they forgot? The boomers, the Scorpios, and the Capricorns. And now Scorpio is ruled by Mars, that's Aries. Mercury also ruling Gemini, and Saturn also ruling Aquarius. And this is the bisextile in the air and fire trajectory that we are experiencing right now. Everybody wants sovereignty. Entire humanity wants to abolish slavery. Decentralized people talk about what rituals did the Pope have to do. Today they have these conversations. Something to do with children. I know nothing. Nobody talked about the satanic abuse under the Vatican, the satanic abuse under the Vatican, the satanic abuse under the Vatican, the satanic abuse under the Vatican. Then you have people talking about it loudly. I had no idea. But the Pope is in too. But anyway, satanic ritual abuse should end, no? So, losing my religion. And there is a spiritual warfare in the air. So people that, let's say, they liked Christ, but now they see, well, why did all the content creators disappear except for the ones that talk about Christ? Okay? Now here is the thing. Saturn Neptune, back to Saturn Neptune. I don't know, there's a whole Gigi Young video about that. But again, all this like this Christ and Christ and Christ. I'm like, all my love to Jesus. What about other religions? Now, at the same time, it is indeed that Christ that created the United States, that the divine God, the John Locke, okay, that on the basis of which we abolished slavery as well. And John Locke's tabula rasa is very relevant to our times. You think about the cloned people, and people say, oh, they have no birthright. Yes, they do. But they are psychopaths, but that is, no, only the people that go through ritual abuse until they are forced to behave in such a ways like the people were forced to do those things in the Holocaust to preserve themselves, because it was the survival of the fittest, which created the deterioration of the race, basically. Than they did, but that had implications. So that means that the people that we cloned to be slaves are going to want sovereignty now. Yes, the people, they're born, they want sovereignty. And this is where the John Locke tabula rasa principle becomes very evident. A man is born, a person is born, baby is born, tabula rasa. Okay, how you grow it is how they grow. So John Locke was addressing MK Ultra a couple of centuries before us. He's still relevant. And so, yes, the Christ impulse is important in that sense, because it kind of, it accommodates for humanity in a way where the competing religions would have to keep up to speed with that. And it also abolishes the ritual satanic abuse, because if a man is born and tabula rasa, also a woman is born tabula rasa. And so the whore of Babylon, so to speak, was simply a satanically, ritually abused young girl or infant that grew to hypersexuality or to being trafficked. She's not an unrespectable woman. She's not a... It's like if we abolish satanic abuse, we get women. And we get men. We may get non-gender, all gender, okay, well, but until we abolish satanic abuse. And so, but then we go to the funding again. Now, Mars in the beginning of Libra tells it as it is. Those that religions that rely on human that fund themselves by human trafficking, okay, have an expiration date, because you can't go according to their teachings, whether on a medical level, whether on a relational level. Their teachings are not good anymore, that their fig tree doesn't bear any more fruit. Just like Christ said, okay, why would you do rituals underground, you do rituals in the forest, the soil is polluted, the energy, okay, is not yielding, and then that fig tree bears no fruit, it's famine. And so what happens when the fig tree bears no fruit? People are asking, where's God? We went by your teaching, we keep to this, we keep to that, we did that, we did that, we did that. Where is God? What is missing? And it pops from the ground. Or maybe those people that talk about satanic panic weren't just panicking. And then people say, okay, maybe there are other gods. And the spiritual warfare that was done to keep people in check, what it does, even to combat, okay, say deliverance prayer. You say deliverance prayer, helps for 1 minute. Then another time, say deliverance prayers. Like what? All day I'm going to say deliverance prayer. Where am I going to make love? Where am I going to travel? Where am I going to make a life while making a living? All day I'm going to say deliverance prayer. What is missing? It's the same people that tell you to say deliverance prayer that are doing those voodoo rituals. Pagan rituals. Okay? Now, where is the ritual coming from? Because that might give us a context. Slaves were doing those things to release themselves from slavery. Now you have goggle moguls doing those things to enslave people. Okay? They say, this is technology, I'm going to use the technology, I'm going to use it in that way. Okay. And then the people will say, okay, well then do return to sender, original sender. Then everybody freaks out. What are you freaking out on? It was supposed to be me that was dead? Now, this is where people are beginning to see that all the religions and sects, now let's say you say deliverance prayer, Christ, amazing. Let's go to church, Christ, I don't know. You go to church, they give you some teachings, and you find that when it comes to relationships, Libra, not so working. Women say, I do all the right things. Why my husband not faithful? What's missing? Or husband says, I'm doing all the right things. Why wife not satisfied? What is missing? Yes, what is missing is that the teachings that you got were based on the courtesan division of society. So you're not. Every time the moon is in Taurus in that deacon, it's embarking the deacon of spirit and matter, and balancing spirit and matter. So what happens is people were raised on the Cartesian division is that there is mind and there is matter, and those are distinct things that maybe you need an alchemical process to unite them. The courtesan is the raped people, not just women but also men. There are also men courtesans. I hope we're going to have some. Okay, other than the trafficked boys, um, the courtesans were not just ladies, and this is a division. People are raped so that they can have sex without love, and then they trade the sex. But what they trade is the creative energy, and this is how the courtesan exposes people to the incubus succubus. And then you have the religion that says, well, this person is a whore of Babylon, is a courtesan, is an incubus or succubus. It's not the lady, it's the handler. But also the handler was the whore in those rituals. And what happens is that these teachings are not good to society, because people have Madonna whore complex. Why? Because they participated in those rituals, and they still need to curate the split that is the result of ritual satanic abuse. Why is it done? Well, Christ needs a bank. It needs to fund for its existence. And so the teachings of Christ are no longer Christish. They're not working because the degree of mercy tells us that the courtesan was raped, so she needs to curate from ritual abuse that she went through. And then, lo and behold, she was raped by the church as well. It's those people that are not supposed to sleep with anyone. Um, and um, and the man who deals with his aggression um, needs to curate and learn to manage anger, which means he needs to assert himself and be sovereign and abolish slavery, even in its modern form. And so, but that would unify the spirit and matter, and these two would make love, and then they wouldn't ponder about Jesus all the time, because they wouldn't need to be saved. Okay, the first condom, I think, was made from the skin of an ox. French letters existed before the pill, but then if they would have the wisdom not to put it all on one partner to tend to the fertility thing, and would maintain, everybody's rights and sovereignty in the process, then they don't need that many saviors. They might be fascinated with nature, um, but then okay, that's just a trajectory. People need the third party, the state, the God, when they don't get along in and amongst themselves. And then they allocate certain types of the freedoms, that's the social contract, to that third party. So those that create the division to profit off from that, they profit off of the courtesan-partisan division, which affects the medical field, okay, because we're not matter and mind competing, okay. The Chinese culture revolution was mind over matter. Now, definitely the mind can transform matter, but you also need to eat. When Chinese people discovered that, they decentralized the party. So the Chinese party that everybody say, no, this is not democracy, it's not anywhere near us, and so on. They decentralized Mao, okay? The dynasties upon dynasties upon dynasties upon dynasties of the if a dictator is living, ruler, is being unalived, then they lost mandate of the heaven. Means they weren't good for the people. And then after the Cultural Revolution, they decentralized the party. And then they tried to create an artificial sun, and then now people are melting. And I don't know, I mean, go figure. China is going through something with the entire world as well. So, but going back to the origin of that concept was the concept that the sky is punishing the land. Yeah, the sky that punishes the land loses the mandate of the heaven, be it Mao Zedong or we the people. And and it's kind of it's kind of happening. But we need to remember that on a global scale. So the September eclipses are going to bear a lot of religion, and what's outdated is going to both be exposed, because when people tend to something, and if it is their spiritual and religious teachings, okay, people did with Neptune in Pisces. Since 2012, everybody was doing manifestation, Abraham Hicks, and so on. There were people, Satanists, doing Abraham Hicks. Did you know that? And they usually had like a cross, okay, as well. So people are like, whatever works, whatever works, whatever works, and they can't be blamed for that. And so people just try to see what works for them, and that has a trajectory, because people go by the teachings of the religious, and they're like, why it's not yielding? What's happening? What needs to change here? And then they begin to grow discernment about those teachings, and then they begin to follow the money, and then they begin to see, well, if Christ's teachings are still funded by children and people trafficked, then deliverance has limited ability to deliver us from these horrors. We also need to abolish human trafficking and child trafficking. And then the spiritual teachings change. Okay, the Pluto Libra generation tended to the power relations within relationships, and began to abolish rape within marriage. And then they began to understand that the psychology of the aftermath is, certain people have hypersexuality because they were ritually abused, they were sexually abused. And some people avoid sexuality altogether because they were sexually abused. And this can bifurcate. And then some people are perpetrators because they were sexually abused. So what do you do about it? Because they cannot keep being perpetrators. That needs to stop. And sometimes they die in the process of that being stopped. That's war. And as well, the reason that they're doing that is because they were growing on abuse and be abused. And this is the Mars square. Okay, that it's not for nothing that the most important scientific or technology that we remember from Pluto in Aquarius was the guillotine. It was a more humane way to unalive people. And they used it by the masses. Because all of these warlocks, okay, people talk about the witch trials, which were beyond terrible, and the Inquisition, which was beyond terrible. But when we think about, for the modern version, back then was the guillotine. What about the warlocks? Guillotine. They died with the guillotine. So that there was more secular, okay, not religious persecution, and democratization, okay, the foundation for democratization would be built. Now, those people that died by the guillotine, all their blame was that they were born into the wrong time. And they weren't equipped with the ability to transform on time. Now, what can be done to remediate that is challenging, because if you go to those societies that govern society, it's those people that need to transform. And what is going to happen is, with Pluto and Capricorn, the pyramid was going upside down, but if the original was upside down, then that would be turned upside down as well. And this is where people that were doing all those weird rituals began to encounter, particularly war. War is a very funny ritual, okay? That commanders began to be unalived, and that goes up the rank, up the rank, up the rank, up the rank, up the rank. And then we had the monarchy being exiled. And when you think about the going up the rank, in previous time, it was like either you die, and it's not a pleasant way, or you go up the rank. And to go up the rank, you have to kill. People, children, villages, countries, peoples. And then lose the mandate of the heaven. So people try to create a dummy to, that's why they created the golem. They tried to have the golem take on the karma. And it worked to the degree that Pluto was not in Aquarius. Okay? Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was written with Pluto in Aquarius. And I know that from a person that has a placement in Aquarius, and has swiped under the rug certain things that they are 8-housely invested in. So it's like, it's your teaching and it's true. Okay, that the golem doesn't stay a golem. And then what happens? The person that created the golem said, "Oh, this is a bad experience. It's going bad. I have to get rid of it." No, now the golem has a love interest. The golem. So what we created to have take over the karma, okay, became sovereign. And not only that, whether it's AI that kicks in, but the bunker is in Albania kick out. And then if people go to the Stone Age and have unintelligent bunkers, there would be other consequences. Okay, so it's going to the Emir Kusturica, the people that were hiding underground, and then they go out, and then the war is over, or there is another war, or okay, it's like they've been in the bunker, and they come up to the ground, and they are the uncivilized now. So the golem